There was one story Billy Crystal never seemed to grow tired of telling. No matter how many years passed, whenever someone asked him about Robin Williams, he almost always smiled before answering. It wasn't because he was remembering an award-winning performance or one of Hollywood's biggest premieres. It was because his mind always drifted back to a ridiculous moment that perfectly captured the man the public never truly knew. During a Friars Club roast in the early 1990s, Billy found himself trying and failing to keep a straight face, while comedians lined up to mock him. Then Robin Williams quietly stepped behind his chair and launched into one of the most absurd performances of his life. Without warning, he invented an outrageous character that left the ballroom in complete chaos. People laughed until they cried. Billy laughed even harder. Years later, he still couldn't finish telling the story without breaking into that same unmistakable laugh. To Billy, that memory explained Robin Williams better than any award, obituary, or documentary ever could. The world remembers Robin as one of the greatest entertainers who ever lived. Billy remembers the friend who believed every room deserved a little more laughter than it had before he walked inside. That difference matters, because after Robin's death in 2014, millions of people came to know only the final chapter of his life. The headlines were heartbreaking, but they also reduced an extraordinary human being to a single tragic moment. Billy has quietly spent the years since trying to correct that picture, not by denying the sadness, but by reminding people there was so much more to remember. Long before either man became famous, they were simply two young comedians trying to survive in Los Angeles. The comedy clubs of the late 1970s were crowded with dreamers. Every night, performers waited for a chance to stand under a spotlight for a few minutes, hoping their jokes might open the next door. Most disappeared almost as quickly as they arrived. Robin Williams was impossible to ignore. Other comedians didn't just watch him, they studied him. Nobody could predict what he would do once he stepped on stage. He might begin telling a simple story, then suddenly become three different people in less than a minute. His face changed. His voice changed. His body seemed to transform into entirely new characters without warning. Audiences loved the unpredictability. Comedians respected it. Billy Crystal admired something even deeper. Behind all that explosive energy was a man who genuinely wanted people to feel happier when they left than when they arrived. That wasn't an act. It was simply Robin. As their careers grew, so did their friendship. They spent countless evenings together backstage, at comedy clubs, charity events, and private gatherings where the cameras were nowhere to be found. Billy often noticed that Robin behaved almost exactly the same whether he was entertaining 20 people or 20 million. He didn't perform because he needed attention. He performed because making someone laugh felt like a gift worth giving. Friends often joked that Robin couldn't enter a room normally. He always became somebody else first. Sometimes he invented a strange accent. Sometimes he pretended to be a waiter, a doctor, or a confused tourist. No situation was too ordinary for his imagination. Billy loved that about him. Those spontaneous performances weren't designed for television. They weren't rehearsed. Most would never appear in public. They simply happened because Robin enjoyed seeing other people smile. That generosity reached far beyond comedy. For more than 2 decades, Robin joined Billy Crystal and Whoopi Goldberg as one of the driving forces behind comic relief, raising millions of dollars to support Americans experiencing homelessness. The shows were filled with unforgettable comedy, but their purpose was serious. Robin believed fame meant very little unless it could also be used to help someone else. Billy always respected that part of his friend the most. Hollywood creates stars every year. Kindness is much rarer. Robin somehow managed to carry both. Still, Billy occasionally noticed moments that didn't fit the public image. After an evening filled with non-stop jokes, Robin would sometimes become unexpectedly quiet. The room would empty. The laughter would fade. For a few brief moments, Robin seemed lost in thought, as though carrying something he never intended to share. Then, almost magically, another joke would appear. The smile returned. The energy came back. Everyone assumed everything was fine. Billy wasn't always so sure. Perhaps that sensitivity came from knowing where Robin's story had truly begun. From the outside, Robin Williams appeared to have enjoyed an ideal childhood. His father held a successful executive position, his family lived comfortably, and he attended excellent schools. Yet Robin later admitted that his childhood often felt surprisingly lonely. His parents loved him, but demanding careers meant they weren't always around. Left to entertain himself, Robin built entire imaginary worlds with toy soldiers, invented voices for every character, and discovered that creativity could make even the quietest afternoons feel alive. Years later, Billy would sometimes wonder whether those lonely hours quietly shaped the performer the world eventually fell in love with. Perhaps Robin learned very young that imagination could fill empty spaces. Perhaps laughter became a companion long before it became a career. Whatever the reason, his extraordinary talent soon carried him from local comedy clubs to national television. Success arrived with astonishing speed, turning Robin into one of America's most recognizable entertainers before he had even reached his 30s. But fame brought its own dangers. The comedy scene of that era was filled with late nights, heavy drinking, and widespread drug use. Robin found himself caught in that culture alongside many other rising performers. Friends later admitted there were nights when excess seemed almost impossible to escape. Then everything changed. In 1982, comedian John Belushi died from a drug overdose. The loss shook Hollywood. For Robin, it felt deeply personal. Watching someone so gifted disappear forced him to confront the path he was following. Around the same time, he was preparing to become a father for the first time. Those two events transformed his priorities. Robin made a decision that surprised many people around him. He walked away from drugs. He committed himself to sobriety and focused on his family, his work, and the future he wanted to build. Billy admired that choice because it required a strength few people ever saw. The world celebrated Robin for making audiences laugh. His friends respected him for the discipline it took to rebuild his life. For years, it seemed he had won that battle. His career reached extraordinary heights. His family grew, and audiences continued embracing every new role he accepted. From the outside, everything appeared brighter than ever. But life has a way of hiding its hardest battles behind its happiest smiles. Years later, Billy Crystal would look back on those remarkable decades and realize that the greatest challenge Robin Williams would ever face wasn't one anyone could see. It wasn't a failing career. It wasn't public criticism. It wasn't even the struggles people believed they understood. It was something silent, mysterious, and devastating, an enemy that would slowly begin changing the man Billy had known for decades long before anyone realized what was really happening. And by the time the truth finally emerged, almost everyone wished they had understood the signs much sooner. Success has a strange way of hiding the battles people never see. By the late 1980s and throughout the 1990s, Robin Williams seemed unstoppable. Every few years, another unforgettable performance reminded audiences why he was unlike anyone else in Hollywood. Whether he was making families laugh, inspiring students on screen, or delivering deeply emotional performances, he had an extraordinary ability to make people feel understood. Billy Crystal watched all of it with pride. But unlike millions of moviegoers, Billy never measured Robin's success by awards or box office numbers. He measured it by the man who still answered the phone when a friend called. He measured it by the comedian who could walk into a room full of nervous strangers and somehow leave everyone smiling before the evening was over. That was the Robin he knew best. One story always stayed close to Billy's heart. After Christopher Reeve's devastating riding accident, visitors struggled to find the right words. Robin chose a different approach. Instead of offering sympathy, he walked into the hospital pretending to be an eccentric doctor with a ridiculous foreign accent. Within moments, Christopher was laughing for the first time since the accident. Years later, Reeve admitted that moment reminded him life was still worth fighting for. Billy never forgot that story, because it revealed something few people truly understood. Robin didn't use comedy to escape pain. He used it to help other people survive theirs. That compassion quietly shaped every stage of his life. Whether raising money through comic relief or encouraging young performers behind the scenes, Robin gave far more than audiences ever realized. Fame never seemed to matter as much as making another person feel a little less alone. Perhaps that was why the changes that followed were so difficult to understand. At first, they seemed almost insignificant. Robin occasionally forgot a line. He appeared unusually tired after long days. Friends noticed moments when he searched for simple words or lost his train of thought. Everyone assumed he was simply exhausted. After all, he had worked harder than most people for decades. Robin believed that too. He kept filming. He kept performing. He kept smiling. But inside, something no one could explain was beginning to take hold. The confidence that had defined him for so many years slowly gave way to uncertainty. Some mornings brought anxiety without any obvious cause. Other days, even ordinary conversations felt strangely difficult. Billy would later admit that none of them understood what they were witnessing. Looking back, that may have been the hardest part. The signs were there. No one knew what they meant. Robin continued doing what he had always done. He protected everyone else from his own struggles. Very few people saw how frightened he had become. He had built an entire career on the speed of his imagination. Suddenly, that same brilliant mind no longer felt completely under his control. For a man whose greatest gift was spontaneous creativity, the experience was deeply unsettling. Yet he rarely complained, he simply kept moving forward. When news of Robin's death reached the world in August 2014, millions of fans struggled to believe it. Tributes poured in from actors, musicians, athletes, and world leaders. Across America, people shared favorite movie scenes and unforgettable moments that had shaped their childhoods. Billy Crystal wasn't thinking about famous films. He was remembering his friend. He remembered the impossible energy backstage, the endless laughter between performances, the practical jokes no camera ever recorded. Those were the memories he refused to lose. Only later did Robin's family receive an explanation that answered so many painful questions. Doctors determined he had been living with Lewy body dementia, a progressive brain disease that affects memory, movement, emotions, and thinking. The condition often resembles several other neurological illnesses, making it extremely difficult to identify during life. For Billy, the diagnosis changed everything. It didn't erase the grief, but it replaced confusion.